Hello and welcome to Community Forum. My name is Joseph Feaster. I'm the host of the program. And as I always say, I always have interesting guests to give you interesting information, and today is no exception. I am pleased to have today a man who has given decades of public service and continues to do so, having served as a state representative, served as a state senator, and now as our district attorney here in Norfolk and Plymouth County, well, in Norfolk County, District Attorney Michael W. Morrissey, who has served as and was elected to the district attorney as Norfolk County District Attorney in 2010. So good morning and welcome there, Mr. District Attorney.
That's good to see you. Sorry it's not live, Joe, but it's good to see people out and about and trying to get back to normal. So,
Well, thank you for that. And I definitely want to talk about how this pandemic has affected your operation. I know as an attorney, a lot of the courts, I've done more hearings and, virtually, and that's the reason why we do this program virtually. But why don't you elaborate a bit? I always like to have our viewing audience have a sense of the person who is on the program. I want them to know you as Michael Morrissey, not so much in your position, but who you are, family, and as I had said it in the opening, you've had a distinguished career of public service. So tell us a little bit about you.
well, first, my favorite colors are orange and black, so I have my black night tie on, or as close to it as I can get. So that's not lost on me in Stoughton anyway. I do enjoy public service. I was fortunate that I started a law firm with another gentleman, started practicing law in '85 and started a law firm in '87. And when I left, there was almost 35 attorneys in 3 states. Of course, my one of my partners retired, and the other one is a Superior Court judge. And so there's a new group of people that are running the firm, and they tell me they're much more successful since I left. So, but it was generally a civil practice, and so we were a good sized medium law firm. So I learned a lot about running a law firm for my partners, and I learned a lot my years in the legislature about making laws and getting people the tools they need to do their job. So the district attorney's office seemed like a nice fit because I could still practice law. You were electing someone to run the largest law firm in the county. I have 65 lawyers who work in the district attorney's office, and still could keep my hand in the public policy side of things. We're always working to change the law and try to make things better or improve the quality of life for people. And I still get to meet not as much. Hopefully, I had a busy week last week where I had 4 outdoor events. So I think we're slowly turning the corner. I hope, but still, the vestiges left over. You and I speaking by Zoom, I think probably has advanced the court system by maybe taking them out of the Stone Ages to the Dark Age. They're getting there, but it is allowed. Like for instance, you can sit at home now and you can do a hearing in the courtroom, so you're not wasting your time all afternoon sitting in the courtroom. You can still, work on other cases and wait till your case is called. That has been a plus. But before that could even happen, COVID took its tail, and being at home, my wife is retired, and we have 2 grandkids, and my daughter and my son-in-law are lawyers, and so they were, still trying to work as well. And fortunately, that my wife, for my daughter anyway, that we only live a half a mile away. So she was when daycare closed and everything else fell apart. The in-laws, my daughter's in-laws and my wife became the primary caregiver. So I've spent a lot of time over the last year with our grandkids, whether we wanted to or not. The good news is we get to send them home at night. So my daughter has a 4-year-old and a 1-year-old. So it's that has been a challenge, like many parents, but we're grandparents now. So that works out pretty well. So I enjoy the job. COVID has provided a few challenges operationally. Murders, we don't get too many in the county, get 10 to 12 a year. I think we had just an average year last year. We still had some serious cases. We still saw some serious crime, and we're still dealing, and maybe we'll talk about a little later in the show about what kills people in Norfolk County is overdoses and automobile accidents, preventable deaths. And it was funny, last April, we had more people killed on the roads in Norfolk County last April when people shouldn't have been driving than the April before. So, I think people are just driving kind of crazy and fast, and we have a vast roadway network in the county, but it's been some challenges dealing with the courts. I can give you that.
Well, I think, and quite frankly, I as well, Mr. District Attorney, I've been practicing law for 45 years. I'm spending more time, my office is in Boston, but I would probably say since last March, I've probably been down there maybe 10 to 15 times for short periods of time. And as I said, yes, the hearings, any hearings administrative wise or either court have been virtually. But let's talk about this, again, and it's always great to hear about the family and all those lawyers in the family and all those grandkids. So great, certainly the Morrissey family. But let's talk about how operationally, and again, we presume that everyone who may be viewing this may know what the district attorney office deals with. And they certainly may think of it strictly in terms of just the criminal cases and all, but you're much more than that because you're in the community. You're a major employer, as you said. You are part of the community, et cetera. Can you give us the expanse of what the district attorney's office covers? And then secondarily after that, talk about how the pandemic has affected as far as your people going out when there have been murder investigations and crimes that have to be committed and their participation in court. How has that affected your operation as well?
Well, I guess the first thing to do is kind of start on ground zero. We had a murder trial going back in March, when all of a sudden in the middle of the trial, the court closed down. And so we didn't even get a chance to finish that case. And so during the period of time, I probably have to stand up here and move because there's a moving light. So I'll wave my hand anyway. But so there's when the courts closed down, we had to figure now what. We knew that people had to be arraigned because people were committing serious crimes, and we knew that there was going to be murders. We knew that people needed help getting access to services. That if you needed a restraining order, so we basically strung together, a bare minimum network of, no one was going to the courthouse. People in the district attorney's office were kind of headed to the house, the a few people, skeleton crew. But if there was let's say a serious domestic, you get out to the Stoughton police station and the police would try to hook you up with one of our advocates who was probably working remote. And we would assist that person in getting a restraining order and get on the phone with the judge in that jurisdiction. And so the police department were the central form of, they were controlling all the traffic. And so we wanted to make sure people got the necessary services and got the paper and the support they needed to be able to protect themselves. And that was the good news. The bad news was a lot of the safety net places where you might send someone and things like that weren't taking people in. And so it presented a little bit of a challenge in that regard. And then the dynamic of people being at home, a lot of times everybody was at home. So if you had a restraining order and the person was told to stay away, for instance, well, generally you knew where you're going to find the person because they were at home. And, it's not like finding a safe, outlet, one dove or a shelter became much more difficult. That was, I think, one of the harder parts. And so we had to work to try to make, the real serious cases, make sure people were protected. And then you said going out to murder scene. That's funny because there's no vaccines then, and we're going out to murder scenes. And so we had to try state police had to be cautious, working with the local police, which we always do. And so, obviously wearing a mask became important, and just collecting the evidence. And some of the attorneys, would not necessarily be as present as they would. They'd be more available by phone or computer so they could interact with the police when necessary. So we lost a little, I think, of that personal touch. And I know, from the practice of law, you're 45 years in. So you have younger people who work with you, and you've seen a lot in 45 years. And so I think we lose some by not being in the office because you have that give and take.
Right.
Some of it is the camaraderie of being in the office, and some of it, they used to give me a hard time. They enjoyed that. I could take a beating of the rest of them and give one out. But if you had a question, say, Joe, now listen, I have this search warrant and blah, 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 blah. And, so have you ever seen anything like it? What would you do? And so, yeah, you can still pick up the phone, but it's not the same when you can just walk into your office and have a conversation. You can get a couple of people together. And I'm a firm believer in some of the senior people have to drag the younger people along. And I I think, we lost that. We haven't really had we went almost 15, 18 months without a trial. And that I think has hurt us all. I mean, I had senior people dying to try cases that were jumping in, trying district court cases just to keep their hand in, to stay fresh. And down at Lombardo's. Now, I don't know if you're old enough, you're if you grew up in the area, if you went to a prom at Lombardo's, but we had people that were kind of laughing when that was one of the problems that we actually had. We didn't, after we finally got to the point where you'd have an arrest, we were one of 3 counties that didn't have a courthouse capable or able of holding a trial. And the age of the buildings, I mean, in Norfolk County, it's we're one of 3 counties: Berkshire, Cape and Islands, and Norfolk. And the newest building is Quincy District Court, which I say is I can't repeat it on TV, but it's 10 pounds of what in a 5-pound bag, and
I know.
it's a very difficult place. That the air quality is bad, and on a good day, and the windows don't open. And then, the oldest courthouse we have is Superior Court. That even if you take your and my age together, when we throw in Roy, there's still not enough years. I mean, it was built in 1820. Had Sacco and Vanzetti tried in 1920. It's a nice old building. But they finally determined that we couldn't meet the spacing requirements, for safety, and we couldn't meet the air quality requirements. So they had to look for an alternative site. And Lombardo's, I guess, came to be. I'm not sure that was the best choice, but it was the choice that they chose. Spent a lot of money to do it. Sadly, there was only one Superior Court case tried at Lombardo's, a civil case that resolved after 2 or 3 days. And other than that, the district court used it, pretty extensively. And it's important in the district attorney's office, as you probably know, whether it's civil or criminal, people don't generally want to talk to you until their back is to the wall. It's like doing your homework. You're going to do it tonight if it's due 2 weeks from now, or you're going to wait 2 weeks from now and do it the day before. Most people are procrastinators. And especially when you're talking about people whose outcome of the decision could send them to jail, no one wanted to talk to us. So without the backdrop of having the ability to have a trial, it became difficult to try to deal with some people. Now,
well, isn't that true? I wanted you to relate all of this so that we can, we can put this in perspective as to what the impact of COVID-19 has had on the operations. It's interesting that, not interesting, it is telling what you say about the ability for the interaction for lawyers. That's how you and I learned. We learned by having.
By the old timers dragging you along,
That's right. The interaction, the senior lawyers, had opportunity to tag along with someone in court. I don't do much in terms of litigation presently, but my sense is that's how we learn. And that's happening not only in your law firm, the district attorney's office, but in law firms throughout the country.
Sure.
Because the young folks are not being able, the younger lawyers are not getting the opportunities for that interaction. So that is so very true. So COVID has had a significant impact on the legal profession.
Well, the other area that, and you probably see it in your own office, but we like to take legal interns. What they call Rule 303 is, that the Supreme Court allows under the Massachusetts rules, a lawyer, usually in their last year of school, they actually can come out and they can practice some law, provided they're supervised by another attorney. And so we take student prosecutors into the office. And it's usually a 3-month period of time, either semester or the summer. And a lot of those young people, men and women that we have, it does a couple of things. It allows us to try to recruit people, to try to find a more diverse workforce. It also allows us, it's a 3-month interview, because you can say, you get the person, we get them up on their feet. They start, obviously tagging along with someone, then they start doing arraignments, then they start doing motions, and then we try to get them a trial. I've told most of them, I said, the trial you're going to get, if they're giving it to you, it's probably a loser, but it's a case that has to be tried, and because we can't come to an agreement, you have to let a jury decide. So, you're going to learn the best you can, and you're going to get up and you're going to make your arguments, and they win some, they lose some, probably more than they win. But we try to give them some experience, and then we get to evaluate them. And you get to evaluate, as far as I always tell lawyers, treat people how you want to be treated, and remember the same people that you see, as my father told me, on the way up, you're going to see on the way down. So, and you should be working for that person on the other side. So now, if they're being a jerk to you, well, then you gotta, weigh that into the factor. But, and the other thing is, getting someone convicted is not always the right answer. The right answer is getting someone help. And then now it may mean that that help is going to take the form of being locked up in the state or county correctional facilities. But a lot of times it's getting someone a drug, alcohol, mental health assistance. And Norfolk County, we have all those courts. We have a veterans court, we have a drug court, a mental health court, because we believe in trying to get people help and assistance. And so you get to weigh the character of some of those people. They interact with the coworkers, the supervisors get to watch them, and they usually tell me, they say, "Hey, we had young Joe Feaster in the all summer, and he was really, really good, and he's someone you should hire." So it becomes a good tool for us to hire. And we've not really had interns in the office for almost a year and a half, and I lost a whole opportunity, a crop of getting some young people to get some experience, interact, find out, do you really want to be a prosecutor? And I think that hurts us too, because we're taking chances now when there's a hire here and there on some people that we just really, we have to different type of interviewing, but we don't have the same close interaction with them. And
Well, I
that
graduated
hurts.
from Northeastern law and undergrad, so I had much familiarity with the CAR program. I worked at the U.S. Attorney's Office and the Mass AG. I didn't have the pleasure of
Well,
working for.
that's the difference with Northeastern law. My father's an undergrad Northeastern. The co-op program, the law school is the same.
That's
They're
right.
big on hands-on people. That
That's
they think
correct.
getting you out in the community is half the battle of getting a legal education. Now, when I went to Suffolk, that wasn't the same. Of course, I was in the legislature, and it was harder. But they do have clinics, as they call them, and they have kids who have the time to do an internship. But Northeastern built it into your schedule, which I think is one of the strong points about Northeastern law.
Right. And the reason why I mentioned that is what you were talking about, having a chance for a look-see at the individual to get a sense of who they are, and they get a chance to work in the offices. And I can tell you, it was invaluable to have that opportunity, even what I ultimately did when I graduated from law school.
Well, did one of the
But
people that you tried, did they hire you? When you said you tried the U.S. attorney and the attorney.
well, well, no, because I decided not to do criminal law, but I went into labor law. I went to the NLRB when I graduated from law school. So again, you get a chance to do that. I always tell folks I came from the Perry Mason and when F. Lee Bailey was notable mindset, because I thought I wanted to do criminal law. That's what I thought I wanted to
Yeah, well,
practice.
you got a taste of it, and the taste wasn't for you. Which is
Yeah,
that's equally as important. That people always say, "I'm going to come. I want to be Perry Mason," and you said you got there. Well, so it works for a lot of kids too to say, "I don't think so," or they may become a prosecutor and they say, "I'd like to be a defense attorney," or conversely,
yeah.
"I want nothing to do with criminal law," and
Well, I have to. I was in New York when I was an undergraduate. I met the then DA Gold, and I had a conversation with him, and I also interviewed for the DA in the Bronx, New York, where I'm from New York, and I have no problem being a prosecutor. There is a role to be played. Our society is to be protected, so yeah, no problems with doing that. But the reality is, as you know, when I graduated in '72, I think the DA's offer was probably about $6,000, if that much.
yeah, it might have been a little more, but I wouldn't. It didn't hit 10. I can assure you, it didn't hit 10. So
That's right. But again, but I think that, I mean, your staff was great in preparing some things for you and I to chat about. And as I told Roy, I said, the district attorney and I are going to go in the direction that we want to go. So I have the notes here from them, but I know they were mentioning two things, which are, one of which is directly related to, again, the disruption that COVID has done. And that's with the sense of releasing prisoners from the Dedham jail. And certainly, I'm sure that had an impact on the work of your office in that whole issue. Didn't want the same thing in terms of the COVID outbreak that took place at Rikers Island in New
yeah,
York,
yeah.
for one. So I wanted to have you talk about that as a start. What was that? And those specialty courts that you talked about, I would like for you to re-emphasize again, because you mentioned them. I'm familiar with them because I deal much in mental health and also in substance abuse matters, organizationally and things, and of an interest to me to talk about the specialty courts. And then lastly would be I know your counterpart in Suffolk, Rachel Rollins, has a viewpoint as far as what types of crimes should be treated in a particular way. And I was wondering if there's any thoughts in the Norfolk County District Attorney's Office or your view with regards to how you may treat certain crimes. So those three issues
Sure.
with jail.
Well, first of all, you know the difference between the jail and the House of Correction. So I just would tell people that the jail is where we send people that are awaiting trial, in the House of Correction, which is on the median strip. They're both located together, but the House of Correction is where you're sentenced up to 2.5 years, so people understand the difference. So, we do have murderers that are being held in the jail awaiting trial, and that's a sad part. Where we're down about 25 murders to go. I mean, we just haven't been able to move any cases, and serious cases. A lot of people balked at trying a case wearing a mask. So it was quite evident to us early on in March of last year. On March 4th, the population in the House of Correction and jail together was 489 people. The maximum capacity was 620. And so they had a pretty good crowd. They weren't, maxed out, but that's a pretty full house, almost 500 people, 600 total. And so it became evident to us that with COVID and what we were seeing is we got to deal with the prison population because they were double bunked. They wouldn't have any spacing. There was no really equipment. PPE was tight. And so, we worked immediately with the defense bar, even before the lawsuit was filed by the ACLU. We had 50 people out in less than 30 days. Now, some of them you worked to revise people's sentences, so get them out a little early. Some of them were basically take a chance, put them on a bracelet, and we were basically calling up the defense bar. Now they're all sitting. Sadly, this is my take. So a lot of people sitting on the sidelines, waiting to see what the court was going to do, and we were proactively trying to work with people to make sure that their clients were safe. And we didn't matter to us that they may have committed a crime, and the people who committed violent crimes may not get out. You had to work a little bit harder and work with the courts. And sadly, I think that the defense bar was a little slower to draw. But by June of that year, we had the population down to 302 people. And so a lot of people did get out, and some people did come back. And a week later, we had a couple of those, and we had some funny things happen. In Stoughton District Court, there was a person that was held. We don't charge and don't look for small bail. Bail is really becoming a thing of the past, and cash bail. And because even the court says you have to consider the ability of a person to pay the bail when you're asking the bail. That's kind of hard for a lot of these people who are often indigent. So cash bail has been going by the wayside for years. But I look at the list of everybody who was there. I asked the sheriffs. I worked closely with him to identify. It was Jerry McDermott at the time, anybody who had a health condition, and we worked on those people. And one of the things that stood out, there was a case in Stoughton District Court where the guy was being held on $100 bail, and it was for tagging, for graffiti writing. I hit the roof and said, I'm going to strangle someone. Who did this? And so when I finally found who had the case, I said, we don't do stuff like that. I mean, $100 bail. So the attorney, I had nothing to do with it. It was all the judge and the defense attorney. And I said, what do you mean? He said, well, the guy had some other crimes he had to deal with in another jurisdiction that clearly were much less desirable to go to. And he wanted to spend his time in Norfolk County. So the defense attorney convinced the judge to attach $100 bail to the case so he could stay in the Norfolk County House of Correction and start getting credit for crimes he's going to probably have to deal with in another county. And so I said, well, just get rid of the bail. He didn't want to go anywhere. So that, there was some funny things that happened. There was a person that had some health issues. We're trying to get out, but if we let him out, he had a detainer. He was going to be sent to Arizona. He wasn't going anywhere. And so, we did what we could. And I think we did a really good job of getting the population down to an area that was safe. And the sheriff instituted testing protocols and had medical. And we were really the first county to take those affirmative steps. We didn't wait. So I think that helped us out. Now, also during this period, he had all these cries about mass incarceration. So just people have an idea of the state prison system. When I took office, it was 12,000 people, 11 something, almost 12,000 people in the state prison system. 25% of them are there on murder charges. And so the Department of Corrections says that 75% of those people in the state prison system have committed a violent crime, and they're violent offenders. So that population over the next 4 or 5 years, because we were working on different aspects of sentencing and things, that population 5 years later was down into the 8,000s. And then the legislature passed criminal justice reform, and I would tell you, too little, too late. It was the system was already changing and starting to see the prison population go down. But COVID actually, because no one was going in and people were getting out, they tell me the population now is in the 6,000s. Now, when we started this back, probably 11 years ago, I think we were 47th in rate of incarceration. We are now and have been for a long time 50th. No one is lower than us. And so at one time, I don't have the most recent numbers, but the average in the United States, like 3 or 4 years ago, was 440 people per 100,000 incarceration. The bad states like Louisiana, Oklahoma, Texas were north of 600, 700 range. Massachusetts was down in the 120s. Wow. And we were lower than Canada. Canada like in the 130s per 100,000. So I guess I would tell you that we try to put the right people in state prison. But then you also hear the so-called nonviolent drug offenders, and we don't jail nonviolent drug offenders, but we did do a survey about 4 years ago of the people who were in the state prison system that were there on a drug charge, 94C drug charge. And we took a look at who are these people and what's the story. So we found out that 75% or more of those people had a violent crime. Now, they weren't classified by the Department of Corrections as being violent offenders, but when you look at their records, they either concurrently or in the immediate past had a gun charge, an assault charge, a armed breaking in, robbery, things that are just violent crimes. So they fit the characterization of who was already in the state prison system, even though they were considered primarily drug charges. They never were in the totals, but they fit the profile of the state prison. And then you say, well, what else do we know about these people? And then we look further. They represented 43 arraignments on average per individual. There were no strangers to the criminal justice system. So they were the dealers and the traffickers. And someone with like, for instance, if someone's using a heroin, we don't arrest them, prosecute. We try to get them help. We have programs that we try to get them to. People who are arrested have a drug problem may end up in the drug court. We'll talk about in a minute. But the people that are in the state prison system are bad people. A lot of gun charges, bad people that are poisoning our young people. So, I like to think that there is a national narrative going on about I guess they call it de-incarceration. We're the leaders. We're not the followers. If people did what we did, I think that I'll be better off. So, we obviously get swept away in the national picture. And sometimes I always tell people, don't let the facts get in the way of a good story. We're the leaders. We're the best.
Well, you know what, I do want you to talk about the specialty courts, but I want to underscore what you just said there, because I'm sitting here because I pay attention to the conversation to some extent that goes on about the correctional system and who's in it and the and the numbers, et cetera. I would say that what you've just told me, Mr. District Attorney, needs to be highlighted, because that's not the narrative. Like you just said, don't let the facts get in the way of the story. That's not the narrative. Well, that's out there about the fact that one, the number of persons that are in the system, and two, I almost will call it, and this is my characterization, not yours, the misclassification of the person, because they're listed as having a joke charge, but then they have the serious one that follows it. That is not the lead on the story. So one reason says, oh, all these persons are only in for drug usage sometime, maybe even in terms of drug trafficking, are not violent. And that's just not the case, is what I'm suggesting to you. So either the classification has to change, or we have to tell the story a little better.
Like everything else, having a conversation with you is very helpful to get at one side of the story out. And sometimes, as you know, people have obviously there's a direction people want to go, and when the facts of the story don't fit that direction, it often doesn't make it into the news. And I think that's really where we are. Rachel Rollins and I actually do a lot of things the same. Now, one of the things that people often point to is that Rachel put together a list of 15 crimes, let's say, that Chief Code doesn't prosecute. So ironically, before Rachel came into the office, and even in this office, even before I get into this office, the district attorneys in both Norfolk and Suffolk and throughout the Commonwealth, there's a lot of crimes that we actually have the flexibility as prosecutors to not prosecute a case. And that's why we have diversion programs. because there's a penalty to pay. So for instance, we used to have a country fest down at Foxborough Stadium, and you have a lot of kids. They didn't have anywhere between 100 and 400 arrests. Kids, generally young adults, doing stupid stuff, drunk, and they might be smoking dope, or just acting up and acting out. And so drunken, disorderly, things like that. And we're not in the business of giving people records that don't deserve them. So when you might get arrested, and it's less these days, but they still have problems. They process at the Foxborough Police Station, is sent to the Rentham District Court. And there's like door A and a door B. Door A is go talk to the assistant district attorney and don't get arraigned, and take the diversion program, take a 4-hour course of making better decisions, go do 10 hours of community service and stay out of trouble for 90 days. And this never happened. Or go take a chance with the judge and, say that you're not guilty and, try the case. Most people pick door A. And so, we have a pretty active diversion program that when I inherited the office from Billy Keating, he had for juveniles. We've extended it up into adults and as alternative punishment forms. But Rachel has a hard and fast list. And the only thing I would disagree with is that I can't see me saying to the merchants in Stoughton that I don't prosecute for larceny or shoplifting. And because we do, but we don't do it. Every case has to be evaluated on the facts and the merits of the case. And so if someone's in there stealing some food because they're broke and they have kids at home, there's no one in their right mind is gonna prosecute that person. But conversely, if you're a serial shoplifter, and this is like your 5th, 6th, or 7th time, you're probably going to end up involved in the court. So we don't have a hard and fast rule. We evaluate every single case, whether it is a simple case or a complicated case, on the face of the case. Now, I can't tell you the last time that we've had someone arrested for underage drinking. Just don't do it. I can tell you though, some of those kids may have been getting a boot in the fanny and gone into a diversion program. They may find them picking up papers on Wollaston Beach, or raking the park in Stoughton. You know what I mean? That because you made a mistake. And but driving under the influence obviously is a little beyond that we do prosecute that. But someone smoking or marijuana involved, we force them to try to get into a program, complete at least some education so you know what you're getting into. Why would you want to give a 16 or 17-year-old kid an arrest on alcohol or drugs? It's going to stick with them for the rest of their lives if you don't have to, when you can try to steer them in the other direction. And obviously marijuana now is legal for people over the age of 21, as is alcohol. So it's just I can't tell you that we haven't prosecuted those cases. I just don't have a list.
Let me say, and again, and like you said, I like the viewing audience to know exactly what you do. I would suspect that those who will watch this show will have, wow, I didn't know that District Attorney Morrissey had that type of sensitivity, or his office had that type of sensitivity and that community concern, because they would just think that it's hard and fast arrest, prosecution in terms of jailing. So it's refreshing for them to learn. I know this, but they may not.
I mean, I'm not up the ranks prosecutor. I came from pretty much a civil practice in the legislature, so I approach things a little differently than most of my colleagues.
Yeah, but and again, showing the parallel with what your office is doing is in terms of that recognition that this is a community issue that you're trying to address, particularly in the types of crimes. Speak to that as far as your office interaction with the specialty courts, the drug court, the mental health court, and the veterans court. Can you talk about that a little bit, those specialty courts here in Norfolk County?
A couple things. Some of the cases involving those classes of people, we try to divert and get right into programs that help. Sometimes they end up having to be court involved, and when they find themselves court involved, that each of those programs has, they treat the whole person, I guess. You have a team of people who are all interested. Let's say the Veterans Court, for instance, and they people who obviously served our country in many cases come back. I expected to find young people from Iraq and Afghanistan more heavily involved in the Veterans Court. It's older veterans, and from the Vietnam era, and so basically one of the things we try to get people back into the community. So how do you do it? You get a judge who cares. In this case, it's Jimmy Byrne, who took over Judge Mary Hogan Sullivan, who has a son who is, I think, a West Point grad. So I mean, you have people who who are sympathetic. You get someone from probation who work closely, hand in hand. There's veteran mentors who work with the individual, and you get a prosecutor. I had at one time I had 3 or 4 people who were JAG officers in the military, and the Captain Sean Riley still is my guy in the Veterans Court. He's still in the JAG Corps and still working for us, and a good attorney. And they meet usually one afternoon a week, and they identify certain people who could be referred to, let's say, the Veterans Court. The same is true of mental health and the drug court, but the Veterans Court is a good example. So what do? They get the VA involved, they get other social service agencies involved. So if you were a veteran, a lot of these people have drug, alcohol, mental health, employment issues, housing issues. So we have a housing component. They have people who try to deal with the mental health part. They have people who do substance abuse counseling, and there's a whole team of people that will work on the whole person. And they put together a plan, and they basically, I like to say, they kind of sit on them, and that they try to encourage them, and they try to have them enroll in the programs. They teach them how to get a resume together. They help them find employment. They may get them temporary housing when the time comes, and they put the thing together so that they get them back, and they work them back slowly so they can get back, become a productive member of society. In some cases, reunited with family members, and that it's not a ton of people that get through the programs, but the success rate is like 90%. As far as recidivism is way up there. So. And when you have a committed team of people who are doing, it doesn't take any really much more money. It's really committing resources that we already have to do that. And we've done that with, I think, the only county, with the first county in New England to have a veterans court. And we've had a drug court for a number of years. And Billy Keating may have started that. And the mental health court is been around for a while as well. So I think we have most of specialty courts. And the courts finally actually designate a judge to run the specialty courts statewide. And we were leaders in Norfolk County of many of those. So I just
Judge Coffey is that person. Judge Coffey out of West Roxbury.
And so a decent person, you know what I mean? That you need an understanding, compassionate individual who has some patience. Now, Judge Hogan Sullivan used to say, I'd rather go to jail at times than face Judge Hogan Sullivan at times. She was a taskmaster. She kept people in line. She did a wonderful job. She was a great person, but she was stern but firm and fair and compassionate at the same time. And that's what you look for in these courts. And the courts have done a good job of identifying those people. And we in the district attorney's offices who have those courts try to identify equally types of people that fit the mold that we need to those courts. And I think they work well. I mean, it still can't cover everybody, but it covers a good base of people.
Well, again, I am impressed with those courts. I wanted to have you speak on and elaborate on the specialty courts and the work of your office, because they are so important. And it brings as I call it, a non-criminal factor to those persons who may have special needs, and they do deal with the whole person. So I'm glad to see how intricately your office is engaged with those specialty courts, Mr. District Attorney. So
we have to do a little more.
I congratulate you.
A lot of people who end up court involved have a co-diagnosis of mental health, substance abuse, and we got to do a little bit more to deal with that. I know the sheriff, the last 3 sheriffs have placed some emphasis on that, and also on reentry. So we kind of work with them as well to see whether we can keep people from coming back. And the prison population, I think we're doing a good job in that regard. I mean, trying to identify the right people. I have a heavy emphasis on prevention, intervention, and that's another area that we got hurt in COVID, because we weren't able to go out and talk to the schools as much. We weren't able to talk to some of the other groups, the substance abuse groups that work hand in hand. We have, when I took office, there was 5 community coalitions. You've had a really strong one here in Stoughton for many years, and Stephanie runs that, and you guys have invested in heavily into. You recognized early on how important it was to have a group of community people supported by the family of people in office in town, to get the word out that this is a problem that we as a community have to deal with. We took that model that you had successfully started, because Stoughton was one of my earliest ones that started before my time here, and we saw how successful that was. And then we had people like Stephanie Patton. She was a mentor to, I think we started one next door in Avon. And so we grew the community coalition so that there's one that covers every part of the county. And they do some wonderful outreach work, and some of that required, obviously, I think, in-person interaction, and we lost a little of that. So they had to go to Zoom, and they had to reinvent themselves. And we came up with some good stuff, and we came up with some struggles. You know what I mean? That stuff that I think we were missing, like the law firm. That there's some good things we do, and there's some things we miss. So we actually had our first in-person meeting of the community coalitions last week. And so we're kind of back up and running. We provide a support network to them, exchange of ideas. Sometimes we help pay for programming for them. And so we seem to be back in business or heading in the right direction. As I said to you, what kills people in Norfolk County are drugs, alcohol, or a high percentage of substance abuse. But it's Billy Keating left office, and there was 40 people. He said to me, he said, you have to pay attention. Drugs, substance abuse, it's going to be, he said, I see it being a big issue. And he was right. So 40 people that we identified, the state police and the local police, when there's a death in town, work together and identify, as a matter of law, the district attorney determines whether or not to charge it's an accident or it's a homicide. And so someone who may die of an overdose, we have to go out and investigate that. And so it went up to 3 years ago, I think we hit almost 175 people. Now, that doesn't mean that someone from Quincy or Stoughton, where I live in Quincy, may not have died in Boston, but we use the metric we use is when the state police go out and identify, and that's, at least we have control over that right away, because sometimes the Department of Public Health doesn't give us the data till almost a year later. And so we've also set up a data-driven support network that the district attorney's office paid for with the help of I affectionately say, kind of tongue-in-cheek, the drug dealers in Norfolk County. We brought a software program with the money that we've got from the ill-gotten gains. And so we now know that if someone from Stoughton should overdose in Quincy, then that they get the feedback and they try to go to the family, or in many cases now, we have a Norfolk County Cares. Stoughton does. We have a package of materials if they successfully render an overdose, save someone through Narcan. We trained everybody the use of Narcan. We just bought Narcan for the schools, nurses, through, again, drug forfeiture money. Now, people say, well, why do you have Narcan? We don't have that big a problem with the younger kids in the schools, and that's true, by the way. But who comes into the schools? The parents, users, renters, others. And so it's just one more tool in the toolbox for the school nurses who have their hands full, or athletic trainers and others. So we're trying to save people. And I think that education and prevention is something that, because I'm not an up the ranks prosecutor, I came from the outside and mostly a civil practice, but I've dealt with prosecutors 34 years when I was in the legislature. So I'm not, not a babe in the woods, and I've tried a number of cases on the civil side. So it's worked out well in that regard, because I think we approach things a little differently.
Well, I mean, it's just commendable. And I bet you folks going to look at this program and say, wow, I didn't know that's what the district attorney's office says, that sensitively dealing within the community, certainly protecting the community with the responsibilities that a district attorney's office has, but it's much more than that in terms of the education, the cooperation with the specialty court. So I commend you, Mr. District Attorney. But before we, because we have maybe about 13 minutes or so, and I want to follow some of what your staff wanted us to talk about. So I'm going to get there.
I'm talking about this anyway, because I think these issues that you hit upon, I mean, you and I haven't talked in a while. And,
that's right.
But I think that you recognize it as important issues. And I think it's an opportunity for me to, as you said, we don't hear a lot about this stuff. Well, this is one of the ways that I have to get the story out too, about, what we do in Norfolk County, what district attorneys do across the Commonwealth. So,
well, Community Forum with Roy Cohen and me is always open to you to get your message out, and Stoughton Media Access Corporation. So
sure,
if the story's not being told straight anyplace else, you'll be able to tell it straight on smack.
Yeah, and I welcome the give and take, and I don't mind answering questions. If I can't answer the question, I shouldn't have gone down that path then. You know what I mean? It's one of those things. You have to be able to stand up for what you believe, and I appreciate the opportunity. So,
well, what I want to do, because again, COVID has raised another ugly head, and that is the amount and the types of scams that have been fostered on people as a result of this, on our elderly, the housing ones. I mean, there's a multiplicity of them, and I know your staff gave me some backdrop on them and wanted you to talk about those, on telling people to beware particularly our senior citizens on the types of scams. Can you talk about a few of those, Mr. District
Well,
Attorney?
first of all, I think we try to do a lot of outreach work with, especially with the elderly community, who we think are often very vulnerable to attacks. But we weren't able to do a lot of the in-person education. We've had to resort to Zoom, and that we've done what we could, I guess, during the dark days of COVID. But we're getting back out there now as the senior centers open back up, Stoughton's open back up, and we're trying to reach more people and talking about it in the program as part of our activities. But it never ceases to amaze me how people find ways to try to take advantage of other people, especially try to have them take their money. It's always usually about the money. And we had a woman, we had a case just in the past week from Franklin, where someone listed a house for rent on one of the Craigslist or one of the sites like that, and for a house in Franklin, and then sent the person a lease and took their money. And the people were showing up to move into the house, and the woman lives in the house, and she had no idea, that any of this was even going on, and it was nutty. And so the person said, "I have a lease." And I said, "That may be good. This is my house. I didn't rent it to you." And so you find the internet has been great in many ways, but I think it's also we're seeing some of the bad things that can happen even during COVID. If you're passing reliable, legitimate information onto people and you're using the internet, it's a wonderful thing. And the problem is that there's the question, there's the gray areas, and then there's the other areas that are completely whacked out, where people are untruthful liars, and the underpinnings are so far gone that you just can't believe it. But as people get hooked in some of these scams, you can see how they also start to believe, form their views about whether it be politics, vaccines, travel, whatever it is. I mean, the internet is shaping people's view of the world, for better or for worse. So you have to be a little cautious, which gets us back to scams.
Yeah, well, there are some of them, and we probably won't have time to talk about all of them, but some of the highlighted ones is called the grandparent scam,
Oh, I
the
had
social
some fun.
security scam,
Yeah.
the fundraising scam, the fix your gutter scam,
I
the
had
pave your
well,
driveway scam. So
that
pick
one's
any
been
one
around
of
for
those
years.
that you
You
want,
remember
Mr. District
you
Attorney.
got the driving one is one of my favorites, because that's been around for since time when, even when we were kids. It's someone you can't use the word the gypsies, because that's obviously not appropriate. But when years ago, the so-called travelers, if you take a look at the license plates of the cars, usually Florida, New York, or other places, they come to your door and they want to seal coat your driveway. And people would say, it's only $100, and so they take old motor oil and they'd have a big tin, and they'd take the squeegees and they'd do the driveway, and it looked like $1 million. And the first rainstorm, it was gone. And so I mean, that scam is still out there. And the other people that want to fix your gutters and just happen to be in the neighborhood type of thing. Listen, it's, again, it comes down to if they're trying to take your money from you, then be very cautious. And there's certainly the in-person scams. Oh, we get up there, there's a problem with the roof, it's only for another $100, we can fix this and that, and there's probably nothing wrong with the roof. So go to a trusted individual. Go to someone who's known. Call a neighbor. If someone's really doing work on a neighbor's house, get a recommendation. There are websites that actually keep track of valuable people. But if you don't know them, buy yourself some time and say, well, give me your card and your phone number, and talk to someone, or have someone there with you if you have some concern. And those are the in-person scams. The grandparent scam, actually, I had someone do that to me. And call up, and if you call your house Joe and say, "Is this Joe Feasty?" You say, "Yeah, this is Joe," and said, "Well, your grandson is I'm calling because he asked me to call. He's in jail in North Carolina, and he's he needs $2,000 to get out, and he asked me to call you." And you'd say, oh, "Is that Michael?" And yeah, your grandson Michael. So you already told the
Right.
guy who it is, and so I had the guy on the line, and so they said they have a grandson. I said that they have whether it's my son or grandson, and so I said something like, my brother's Patrick, and so I said, Patrick, and they said, yeah, your son Patrick, and I know his son Patrick, and so I kept the guy going a little and had a little fun. I said, well, you know what? He's always been a pain in the neck anyway, so keep him, and hung the phone up, but I had a little fun with the guy. Now, what am I supposed to do? And I'm writing this stuff down, and I kept him talking. And anytime anybody is looking for your basic information, when the grandparents scheme and a lot of the others, when they're dealing with relatives, they always say, is this Joe? Yeah, this is Joe Feaster. And I'm calling about your son and your grandson. And you give them the information. Don't give them anything. Don't give them an address. Don't give them that opening. And
It happened with a friend of mine's, my roommate in college's mother. She got a call about for me, and she was about to, so I had to send her the AARP one about the fraud pieces, which says, she was told, and she loves me dearly, and so she would have, fortunately, she
yes,
called my roommate from college,
exactly.
and he told her,
Don't
don't
do
pay
it.
any attention to that. But
Exactly.
it's very likely, like you said, the one generally people do exactly what you say. They say, "Oh, my grandson," and they give them the name. They
Uh,
give them the name. But talk about one more, the Social Security one, because
uh,
that's another big one.
Well,
Again, our seniors.
anybody's trying to charge you for Social Security, for your card. That's one of the scams. AARP does a great job of putting scams out to the membership and letting people know. But the other one was more recently. We had a guy that we grabbed at the airport in Chicago. I can't say too much about it because it's an active case, and we work with our federal partners as well because I think it's originated outside of the country. So you have to watch out for someone called up and says there's been like an overpayment of Social Security. If you don't do it, the marshals are going to show up and blah, blah, blah. Trust me, the Social Security or the IRS, if they want to find it, they'll find it. They're not calling you on the phone. And generally, they're not emailing you because how would they have your email address? So, as a practical matter, just take information from people and then trust and verify later. Say, okay, fine, okay, geez, I'll have to talk to my wife, even if you're not married. Let me talk to her and I'll get back to you. I'm not, she handles the books. Give me the information, take the information down. Just put them off and take the information. Call the local police and say, this is a story. Call a trusted friend, a relative, someone who, if you're concerned about whether it's legitimate or not, call the district attorney's office. And generally, we can track that stuff down. And I would tell you 99.9% of the time, they're trying to take your money away. And so don't give your social security number out, shred your papers, all the basic stuff that you would expect people to do. Rip them up. You don't shred or rip them up. And we have shredding events once or twice a month, the Stoughton Council on Aging. We have people come from all over town and we hire the company to show up for a morning and people dump their stuff for free. Guide your ID these days. And that's the guy who's heading out of the country had a couple $100,000 on him. And we think he's probably has scammed more than millions for people and probably headed to India, we think is where he was going. So
Well,
that
we have a few more minutes, Mr. District Attorney. Two things I'd like for you to do is whatever you want to talk about in the few minutes that we do have left. I want to give you a sense of how you would like to wrap out the round out this particular segment of the program, but also to give you a phone number if because you have a community service component as well that you work within your office. If you want to leave a phone number with them, I don't know when this program, because we're now in everything being produced, whether a phone number will be up or not. So why don't we give a phone number and then let's talk about
if
some of
nothing
the things
else,
that you would want to say that we haven't covered.
well, the phone number of the DA's office is 781-830-4800. And usually it's the 9 to 5 phone number, but if, take messages. If you have a serious problem, we tell people call the police. Don't hesitate. I mean, they want to be called beforehand and after the fact. We tell people after they take your money, it's hard for us to get the money back. We might catch the person if we get lucky, but a lot of these schemes originate outside of the United States, and that reach is much harder to get. We got lucky because this guy was flying out. Our federal partners helped us out. We identified him. They grabbed him. He's back sitting in jail now, awaiting trial in Massachusetts. So Amazon, Bank of America, be careful of all those people. They're the scams. If it doesn't feel right, it probably isn't right. and no one needs an immediate answer to anything. So take a deep breath and have someone look at it. And so COVID has been ripe. They've had, I think someone said the Federal Trade Commission had 500,000 complaints in the past year during COVID for COVID-related scams that are going on. People trying to sell the vaccine crazy. No one sells a vaccine. It's free. Your insurance company picks up. The government pays it. You do not buy stuff like that. You don't buy your Social Security card and crazy stuff. That people, but still people are doing that to vulnerable members of our population. So you got to stay on guard. And finally, we're making headway. We're trying cases now, slowly but surely. Quincy District Court is up and running. Stoughton has had some bench trials. Rentham, I had a trial last week. We had some Superior Court cases. We'd hoped to try a murder case in September, but the defense attorney got sick. But we have a 2 or 3 murders scheduled between now and the end of the year, and so we've got to deal with that backlog and the serious crime. That's really the focus of some of the things that we're doing. Is a lot of these people have waited. Takes a couple of years to get a case to trial anyway. On a good year, we have a Stoughton case, which I hate to admit, that's now 8 years old, a murder case that we're trying to get tried, and the defendant has gone through 5 attorneys, now 5 defense attorneys. We've prepared twice to try this case, and that's one of our top things. And that's the oldest case we have in the office, and because they're dealing with someone's liberty interest, the court sometimes bend over backwards. I would say too far sometimes to protect these individuals. I have 5 attorneys that you and I have paid for, Joe. So we're going to get that to trial. And there's those are the focus right now, and get the people back out and educated and about scams and about staying safe in their home, and start to get some of the outreach programs that we have and diversion, so we don't deal with that. We had a program. If you have an old crime you committed, if you were in the presence of a hypodermic needle, that was a crime. If you have an old marijuana conviction, we can expunge your record. We were the first people to train people, and all the defense attorneys and others to do that, because the legislature changed the law. So,
Mr. District Attorney, I mean, this has been such a bountiful conversation, and I'm sure that our viewing audience will certainly have learned more than they ever thought they knew about the District Attorney's office. And you have
sign up
definitely
again in another month or two. And you and Roy, I appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, well, in terms of fine, well, again, I like an informative program. You certainly have provided that. I've even learned about the work of your office, and so the reality is, I just want to thank you for being on here with us here at Community Forum. As I said earlier, Community Forum and Stoughton Media Access Corporation are friendly to the District Attorney's Office in Norfolk County. So whenever you want to come back, we will have you. And I want to bid you a great day
thank you
as
both,
you go forth.
Thank you, my friends at Stoughton Cable, who bailed me out today. So I apologize for a little confusion, but I'm happy to be on the show, and Roy for doing the legwork early on, and Joe, it's great to see you. So thank you for the invitation.
Always great to see you as well, Mr. District Attorney. Have a blessed day.